Hello, and welcome to the Bomb Squad. I'm your host, writer director Andrew Hada, and I'm here with my co host Joshua Epp. And we're here with Lucè.
That's correct. Lucè.
I got too nervous and I
Oh, you
You're
did
stopped.
like
get nervous.
second guessing
You're
yourself.
doing a
Yeah.
great job.
Yeah, Lucè Tomlin-Brenner,
Yes,
who's a writer, director, filmmaker. I like to say filmmaker, covers all bases.
it's true.
Yeah, how are you?
I'm doing great. I'm excited to be here talking about one of my favorite movies that people don't love enough.
Yeah, and of course, on the Bomb Squad, we talk about underappreciated and underlooked movies, which is our movie today is perfect because Luce has picked Home Fries. Home Fries is a 1999 film. It was written by Breaking Bad's Vince Gilligan, which I'm sure we'll get into. It was directed by Dean Parasot, which is I looked up what else he did, and I'm like, oh my god, I'm surprised because he did like Bill and Ted. He did all the Bill and Teds. He's done like Galaxy Quest and like Home Fries. It feels like a very different film than those movies. Um, and it stars Luke Wilson. It stars Drew Barrymore. It stars Shelley Duvall, which is cool.
Mhm.
And it stars Jake Busey. Some say the best Busey.
I think
Uh,
so. The
yeah,
best, the best teeth for sure.
he's like the Blade of the Busey family, where he has all of the strengths and none of the weaknesses. And so, Josh, tell us what Home Fries is about.
A pregnant fast food worker becomes entangled with a family in a way she didn't expect.
Yeah, that works.
It's a very vague, what I was looking, because I went into this movie completely blind too. It was very like, I
Ooh.
don't know what this is about, and how do you even market this? You know,
Yeah,
like,
Mhm. Yeah,
so.
they chose the worst possible way to market it.
yeah, and we'll talk about it in a second. But yeah, it's like the from the poster, you're like, oh, this is a rom com, and it's
It's
kind
not.
of, but not really. Uh, so, Lizette, why did you pick this film?
I watched this film when it came out, like when it got released on home video. I rented it from my local video store, Bookseller Video in Elyria, Ohio.
Nice.
And it was, I think, the first dark comedy that I ever saw. And it opened up this world of humor that I didn't know had existed up until that point. This was the first time I'd saw a movie that wasn't big and goofy, but was like about murder and had a bunch of people who were losing their minds trying to kill each other, but it was funny. Like I had no idea that you could cross those lines at all. And I remember thinking that it was almost like a secret that I was watching. I'm like, oh my God, this is like, I was like 13,
Yeah,
14, but in my head, I was like, this is really fucked up, like
yeah,
I
Yeah.
just, and then that same year, 99 was such a great year for dark comedies because there was Jawbreaker and Drop Dead Gorgeous. And so I was going through, I then watched those and I just was so obsessed and it's become my favorite genre. But it's also a genre that it's really hard to do well because you have
yeah.
to balance the darkness with the comedy. And if there's too much comedy, then it doesn't feel like sly or dangerous enough. And if it's like too cruel and mean, then then it like feels bad to laugh. Home fries work so well because the person that dies is like of little consequence. And
Right.
the and there's so many accidental things that happen in a way that like feel almost realistic, but then the specifics of each character really matter so much, and that's like where the writing is incredible. And I think the fact, we'll probably get into this more, but that Vince Gilligan wrote it, I mean, that's what I'm constantly hammering on. I'm like, if you think the comedy in Breaking Bad is funny, then you gotta watch Home Fries, which is where it started.
Right. Right.
Yeah, I could definitely see like the same shades of it. Like that's like it's a little absurd, but it's subdued enough that you're not like, oh, this is ridiculous.
Yes,
You
because
know?
the characters are playing it so grounded. Like, I mean,
Right.
Luke Wilson is so incredible, and I think this is one of his best roles too. That's completely overlooked. How how scared but also like firm he is the entire time, and so like grounded in his morals. And like Jake Busey as his like totally out of his mind brother who's like
Yeah.
losing control of like his place in the family. Like because each of their characters are fleshed out so well, you understand the game that they're each playing. Just like a really good improv scene. And that's a testament to how great Vince Gilligan is at writing characters, because it's the same with Breaking Bad. Each thing that when the characters get in and over their heads in that show, it's directly because of like their faults and their strengths, and how that adds to how much crazier the show gets.
Yeah, I think one of the good things, and I think it's not just this film, but it's all dark comedy, is that you're able to play with like, because most dark comedies deal with morally ambiguous or
Ambiguous,
just
yeah.
morally wrong characters, but it has like there has to be that moment of hesitation. Like even in this one, it starts off with the two brothers, and they're like, you don't know why yet, but they're trying to scare this guy, and they're like in the helicopter, and they're like trying to freak him out, and actually Jake Busey wants to kill him, and Owen Wilson, like they're having this argument about whether they should actually like blow him away with the helicopter machine guns. But you do need that conversation for us to like these characters who are going to do these bad things. And
Mm-hmm.
I think that Vince Gillian's very good about like, yeah, he's going to show you doing, but he gives you the motivation. And I think that's, or even not the motivation but the hesitation. And I think that's what makes this film so good, is that the whole thing. So they kill the old man, and then they think that the helicopter radio chatter got crossed with a fast food restaurant. So they like try to go figure it out by getting Luke Wilson to have a job. So like all the motivations until he enters that fast food house are like dark and sinister.
Yeah, cover up this murder. And they
Yeah,
Right.
killed him accidentally, because it's their
right.
stepfather and he has a heart attack. So it's not even, they just scare him just by them chasing him with a helicopter, which is absurd in and of itself. Like, it starts
Yeah,
in such a crazy way. You find out that they're, military, and what is that? Air Force.
yeah,
So that's why, they have access to helicopters.
right.
But like, it's so silly that a movie starts with like this helicopter chasing a man on foot. Like,
Yeah, in the middle of like just the regular kind of small town.
yeah, like rural cornfields. Like,
Yeah.
It's just strange because it's like you think about that after you're like, so did he assume that was his stepsons coming to kill him?
they,
You know what I mean? And
yeah,
it
he
doesn't
had to
really.
have known. Like, why
Right,
else
right. You had to know they worked for the Air Force and were, fighter
trained?
helicopter
Yeah,
pilots. Yeah. So
exactly.
was he like, oh, they're killing me for the adultery, which was true, but not in the way that it happened.
Yeah, they were
It's
just
just-
mock gonna shoot him, and he actually
yeah.
was like, "I'm gonna get shot now. I'll have a heart attack."
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so then so they want to see if they got caught, because they don't know it's Drew Barrymore. You find out that Drew Barrymore is the one that the stepdad was having an affair with, but they don't know that yet. They just think that they're just trying to see if they got cross chatter
Yeah, because they could hear the
on the
people at the
radio.
Burger Matic,
You're right.
and then they're like, "Oh, did they hear us killing somebody?" So they want
Yeah.
to make sure they tie up all the loose ends so that they can't get attached. Because right now it just looks like the guy died from a heart attack, and they want to keep it that
Right.
way.
Yeah, yeah. And so Luke Wilson decides to like go get a job to like infiltrate. And so like the cast of characters at that at the burger
Bur-
place is pretty great. Like
Love
they have the
them.
guy who was in 10 Things I Hate About You, the
The
teacher.
teacher, he's so
Yeah.
funny.
Like again, like if you just watch the movie and anytime he's on like in the background, if you're paying attention, he just looks so fed up and like having to do all the work of everyone else that it
Mhm.
was constantly like, if you just look to where he's at, he's always doing something funny in the background.
Yeah, he's always acting. It's the same thing in 10 Things I Hate About You. That guy's incredible, and
Yeah.
I demand he come back to films.
Yeah, I
And,
haven't seen him in a long time.
who knows where he's been? That scene did give me flashbacks though, because my very first job was at Burger King, and just hearing him have to memorize assembling the burger, I was like, oh god, it is like that, and it's horrible. Like,
Yeah. And I
yeah,
do like, because
minor
Owen Wilson
PTSD.
is questioning him like, oh, this meat doesn't look that good. And he's like, we're just making burgers. Like we're just
He's like, get the product out the door. Yeah, and it was like 3 pickles, not 4.
yeah.
It was like great. It's like, oh, that's how they do it too, and it's just so nerve wracking.
Yeah, definitely like, yeah, that little bit of like funny Americana where it's like you could just be like, oh, don't put that many pickles, but the fact that they no, it has to be
They
this
have it down to
number.
like a science.
Yeah.
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 And then
real-
they do, and it's like, and you're doing this for like $5 an hour. It's just like, oh
yeah, it
god.
infiltrates your mind. You probably still remember the whole
Well, yeah, because
steps.
Because later at the funeral, he's reciting it over and over again in his mind, and you're like, "That's how it is." Like it's like an infection in your brain, you know?
Real quick, that actor's name is Daryl Mitchell, and he is still acting. We're just not watching what he's doing. He's in NCIS New Orleans.
Oh
Wow.
yeah,
So
He's
that
like a
would be
main
one.
character. He's
playing
in
into the
100.
70-year-old plus crowd.
Yeah,
That's
he's in 143 episodes. So I think he's doing well, and he's in Fear the
yeah.
Walking Dead, 14 episodes.
Oh, that's what. Yeah, it's funny that none of us will really watch The Walking Dead. Apparently,
Yeah. So we're thinking about you, Daryl Mitchell. We love your work.
you also have Drew Barrymore who plays the woman. She's pregnant in the film, which I don't know if we
Mm-hmm.
mentioned that. And she like you kind of forget how like Drew Barrymore was kind of like America's sweetheart, but she would take these kind of weirder
Mm-hmm.
roles that like you wouldn't think like if you heard the name Drew Barrymore and you saw her, you wouldn't think she would take a role like this. And I think it
Yes.
works well with her image
Yeah,
of
she did a
kind of
lot of
this.
indie stuff, not just like
Yeah,
the big budget rom-coms. And this
yeah,
was like the height of her. I mean, 99, I mean, this is just after like Never Been Kissed. Like
right.
she The Wedding Singer. I mean, this was her like she never hotter than in
Right.
the late
Yeah, and this is
90s.
like it's strange because at first I was like, "Oh, this is one of those. This was just before they all got big." I'm like, "No, everyone was doing pretty well in this movie, you know. They
Mhm.
just thought it would be a big hit." But yeah, it's is very
I
Yeah.
I mean, the
overlooked.
marketing killed this movie. This movie should
Yeah.
have been a big hit because it's like, especially, like I talked about Drop Dead Gorgeous and Jawbreaker. Those have huge cult followings. Everybody,
Right.
everybody who likes this genre loves those movies, and like
Hmm.
mainstream people still kind of need to be turned on to them. But like they have their loves. People do not love this movie, and it's just as good as those other movies. But
Yeah,
it's
and
not
I
about
feel like
teenagers either, and I think that's and also it's like these are people in their 20s. It's got like an odd
right.
demographic. Sorry, go on, Andrew.
Oh no, I'm just thinking like of the because if you think of the poster for both
Ugh.
Drop Dead Gorgeous and Jawbreaker, they kind of at least hint that there's like a surreal kind of darker tone. But
Mhm.
literally, the poster for this movie is just Drew Barrymore and Luke Wilson like standing, like smiling at each other.
Yeah,
Yeah, with like a pink and blue
it
or
even
pink and yellow.
Yeah,
it covers up like the title is over her like stomach, so you don't even know she's pregnant in the poster.
Oh,
It's
that's
like
such a good
they're trying to like
point.
hide what the movie is. Be like, no, it's a romantic comedy that you like, which is what I thought too, because I never heard of this, didn't know the genre, just saw the poster before started like hitting play. And I was like, oh,
Uh
this is some like weird romantic. And I guess it's kind of that, but not really,
it's
you
not
know?
a rom. I mean, if we're gonna get into genres, like there is
I mean, they're
romance in
cute.
it, and it is
There's cute
funny.
romance, yeah, but it's not.
Yeah. Well, and the other thing about it that I really like is that these are working class and like poor rural people, which you
right.
also never get movies about. Like they live in like Drew Barrymore's family like lives in a shack. But like
Yeah.
Yeah,
the the jokes aren't at their expense for being poor, and I really like that a lot too. And the jokes are really at the expense of we haven't even talked about how Catherine O'Hara is the mother.
right, right.
Yeah, the most like the sinister evil of her like pushing her sons, you know,
Oh,
further and
yes, who,
further.
like,
Yeah.
wanted the stepdad to be dead, and,
She's like, I never said kill him, you know, like she
yeah,
always phrases it that way, you know.
always the victim too, like, she while
Right.
she's also, like, an iron fist, and she's, like, they're the wealthier family, and they're made out to be, like, total lunatics, which is great, and, in the last 20 years, there's been a shift for, like, rich people to be good people in movies, which is, like, really a sham,
Yeah.
um, and I really think it's cool that this movie has this, like, oh, these, like this rich woman who's completely out of her mind trying to ruin the life of this like very nice working class young woman who's like just trying to get by.
Right.
Yeah, and I think like one of the best scene that like perfectly encapsulates her character to me is when she's like talking to Luke Wilson and they're like trying to present themselves as like grieving and she's like squeezing his hand and it's like oh my god that's like such a perfect way to like relate that she's like not only is she in charge but she kind of has that like mean streak about her and it's
Hmm.
like oh yeah she's not as innocent as she's trying to pretend she is. I
Oh
just really I
yeah.
mean yeah,
Well, the
Catherine
funeral
O'Hara
is great
is
too because she's
yeah.
just like the histrionics at the funeral are amazing. Like everything the priest is saying, she's like calling out over it and just like. Luke Wilson's doing the burger recitation in his head, and then Drew Barrymore is in the background because
Yeah, she shows up.
yeah, and this is when he realizes that, like, oh, this is the person that my stepdad was cheating with, and he's kind of already fallen for her at the Burgermatic, and he knows he has to keep her away from Jake Busey, his brother, and Catherine O'Hara, his mother,
who's
who are
murder
homicidal.
happy. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I
which
do
is like,
love too. It's almost like a running gag how much more homicidal Jake Busey gets. Like he's
yeah,
talking in bed about like how they could commit the perfect murder. Like
yeah, he's
it's
like
more like he
obsessed with
wants to
it.
just pull it off than like the reason for doing it.
Yeah, doesn't care
Yeah.
about the revenge at all, which almost makes him scarier because he's like
Right.
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 psyched on it.
Yeah, he kind of feels like all he needed was an excuse and he was ready to go,
Right, which Catherine O'Hara takes advantage of because
Yeah.
she, Luke Wilson's really the golden child, and Jake Busey's always been in his shadow, and he wants the love of his mother so bad. So he's like not just a murderer, but also a mama's boy, which makes him like
Yeah.
Right.
truly the most
Which
evil and terrifying character.
it's a
Yeah.
very Joffrey situation.
Yeah,
It did throw me though when they first, because they do kind of show it as a surprise to be like, oh, they're giving the news to her that her husband's dead, and then they both walk in. And he's like, "What's wrong, Mom?" And I was like, "Oh, it's Jake Busey's mom." And then it's like, "Oh, Luke Wilson called her mom too." It's like, wait, what father would produce these two?
yeah, like one of the most handsome men of all time, and then like a total
Right.
freak of nature.
Yeah.
Right. It's like, what happened between these two births?
She was drinking for the second one.
Yes.
When a comedy starts with like somebody getting murdered by a helicopter, you're like, well, literally anything could happen now. Like there's no bottom, and I think that's what makes this genre really fun. When you're like, these characters are capable of anything, and because the world is so heightened, anything could happen. I don't know what to expect next.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think like, and especially a good dark comedy, it doesn't have to have morals, but it kind of has to be aware of your morals. And I think that's what makes this work. Yeah. Is that I'm never like, you can always relate to these people somehow, like Luke Wilson, even though he is like he's doing this to kind of get revenge, he also, he's just kind of trying to help his mom, and he's like kind of in charge of the family now. He doesn't really know how to handle it, and kind of starts falling for this girl. So it's always there where he's always trying to do the right thing even if he doesn't know what it is, and sometimes he's way
Yes.
off.
Yeah, I think he's really the audience proxy in this. We
Yeah.
were supposed to see how you could get in over your head if you were just trying to help your
Yeah,
mom.
because there's really once he realizes that Drew Barrymore is it's like there's no way to resolve that like well. But
Right.
he's like, you know what? I'm gonna wing it, and maybe it'll work out. Obviously, it doesn't, but yeah.
People think dark comedy means shock comedy, and it's not really what it means.
Yes, yeah, exactly. That's why I think it's one of the hardest. Dark comedies and horror comedies are absolutely the hardest genres to get right because you have to really love and understand both. And I think some
Right.
people think they're like an easy cash grab because it's two of the most like lucrative genres on their own.
Yeah.
So it's like, we'll just mash it up. And it's like, oh God, no.
Yeah, again, it's that fine line. And again, that I think the reason that I think so many people want to mash it up is because horror and comedy, they kind of play off of the same thing where you're playing off of not shock but like surprise in both. And so I think people are like, "Oh, so it'll be easy to mix them together." But it's like, no, it takes some work in this.
Right, because
Yeah.
surprises, it's not just stuff popping out of closets. It's a lot of buildup of tension and suspense, which you have to do with, character development and setting the scene in an interesting way that puts you in there.
So, any last words on Home Fries?
I mean, it's perfect.
Yeah,
I
watch
really
it.
I really tried to watch it last night to be like, okay, obviously you're a huge fan. Like, watch it from the perspective of like a critic, and I couldn't. I couldn't do it. I was like, where are the problems? And I just couldn't. I didn't see any major problems.
What was it? Okay, so tell us if people want to find you. Tell us where they can find you. Tell us a little bit about your short films. I know you're working on some, and you've done some.
Yeah. Well, as I've been hyping up the dark comedy, it is my favorite genre. It's the genre that I work in as well. So my first film that I wrote and directed and produced is called Messed Up. It's about a girl whose messy apartment saves her life when a serial killer breaks in and isn't able to navigate her piles.
Oh, that's awesome.
It's really fun. It's 8 minutes. It's in my link tree, so you can find me on Instagram and Twitter at LTB Comedy, because I started my career as a comedian, and then I still do comedy, but I shifted more of my focus into filmmaking. So my initials, Lucè Tomlin-Brenner, LTB Comedy, everywhere. You can find me everywhere. And then my link has messed up on there. And then that did the festival circuit kind of around the country, which is how I met Emma Cogan and Hannah Cummings from Monstrous Femme Films, because our films played at the same festivals. And then I teamed up with Emma from Monstrous Femme Films on my newest short, which is called Surprise, and is about a group of women in their 30s who are obsessed with success and maintaining a positive attitude at all times. And when they witness a murder, it challenges their sunny dispositions. So
Intriguing.
yes, it's kind of like a Jawbreaker meets Sex in the City meets Home Fries.
Oh,
Yeah.
perfect.
It's always in the home fries genre.
Well, there's one other thing I want to plug before we leave.
Oh, go ahead.
It's
Okay,
not
sure.
movie related though. It's my other podcast, which is actually like my crowning jewel. I think I'm most
And that's
proud
the
of.
one that I thought you were gonna do
Yeah,
first. So yeah,
it's
perfect.
because I want to always talk about my film podcast when I'm on other film podcasts, but that one is more like a podcast where we really are like doing it because we love film. But
Right.
my big runaway is my podcast. It's Always Halloween, which is a year-round Halloween history podcast, and
Cool.
is like a huge passion project of mine that I was only able to do because I had time off from the pandemic, and has kind of like taken off, and we have like listeners in Romania and like
Oh, cool.
Portugal and like all like I get these like international letters from people talking about like, oh, we don't have Halloween in my country, but I love it. And I just like,
That's crazy.
it's so cool. It's just, I love doing it so much. Halloween's my favorite holiday, and I'm a huge history buff along with films. And so I like to go into the history of like Halloween icons and Halloween traditions and how we started celebrating them. And then I have a call-in episode too called Small Frights, where I have a hotline where people can call and share like Halloween memories or get Halloween advice. And that one's really fun. And it's created like a cool little community around the podcast. So if that's your
Nice.
thing, anybody out there listening, you can check us out at It's Always Halloween Podcast on Instagram and anywhere where podcasts are.
As a horror filmmaker, I love Halloween, so that is right up
I
our
know.
alley.
I'm
Yay.
So
intrigued.
perfect.
Yeah, I'll
Yeah.
look
Oh my
into
god,
it.
yeah, please check it out. I've taken the last couple months I've just been doing our Small Frights episodes because I'm researching a new chapter I'm doing on witches and the history of witches'
Cool.
connection to Halloween. So I'm going to be releasing that soon, and then when I'm doing the history, I have 2 episodes a week typically. Then the history episode and then the community call-in episode.
Oh, cool. Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah. So check that out, especially if you want to know about witches.
Mhm.
And yeah, yeah, that sounds awesome. And
Thank
okay, well,
you.
cool. Thank you for
Yeah.
joining us. That
It
was
was
a lot of
so
fun.
fun. Yeah, thank you for
Yeah,
having
super.
me. I really appreciate it. This was a blast. It was great getting to know you guys.
Yeah, you
Yeah.
too.
It's
Yeah.
good times.
Thanks.
And yeah, so if also I gotta plug myself real fast. The last ones and Borderland are on DVD right now and streaming. So go check those out. And if you're in LA, by the time hopefully I send this, you can go rent it.
Yes, come get it at Videotech.
Yeah, so go check it out. And
Mhm.
yeah, so this has been the Bomb Squad, and thank you guys for joining us. And go watch Home Fries because it was super cool. Yeah, thanks, and we'll see you guys next time.